Hello, YouTube. I'm Andrew Does Hair. You can find my work on Instagram at Andrew Does Hair. And the thing is, for a consumer, a client, a layperson, having this information and bringing it to your barber doesn't get you a better haircut, just in the way that if you watched a video and learned how to play chords on a guitar, it wouldn't make it any easier for you to hire a musician to play at your wedding. You would just know a couple chords while they are a professional musician. But with all of this said, I just want to go on a little bit about elevation, which is just one small factor in haircutting. And in this case here, pulled out of context from the entire grand scheme of what haircutting is. There is so many other concepts and principles, but with this one alone, if you just see the effects that it can have on your hair, hopefully it'll help you to understand maybe why your hair won't do the thing you always want it to do, or why it keeps flipping out here, or why you can't get volume there. It literally can have as little bit of a problem as it was held at the wrong angle when it was cut. When you go to get a haircut, believe it or not, if you say take 2 inches off, 2 inches here looks different than 2 inches here, looks different than 2 inches here, or here. It's completely different just by the angle you hold the hair. Let me state that although I will be demonstrating this up the entire side of the head, the reason for this is so we can more easily see the product of these techniques and, more importantly, the influence that it has on the hair. But also, these angles have like a micro influence from one small section to the next. If you're holding the hair at uneven elevations, you're going to get a crazy haircut. So first, let's talk about a haircut with no elevation. As you might imagine, this is a haircut that is pulled straight downward to be cut. On very short hair, this is kind of what you would want to do to get a really hard, clean lineup. Everything that's pulled down is going to look very, very blunt. On longer hair, this is going to give you a very sleek silhouette. And what's going to happen is the hair on top is going to be left considerably longer than the hair on the bottom, but they're both going to hang down to the same point. And that shorter hair on the bottom will be more rigid, so it will push out the hair on the top. And you'll often see this kind of beveled effect on certain hair textures. And on other hair textures, it can make your hair push out into a giant triangle shape. 45 degrees. This is when you take the hair and elevate it just slightly to roughly 45 degrees up. If I were to do this using each previous section as a guide to cut the next section, the result that we're going to get is going to be pretty similar to no elevation in that the hair on top is going to be much longer than the hair on the bottom. However, what is different is that this hair on the top is not so much longer than the hair on the bottom that it falls down to the same point. See, when everything is allowed to fall now, the hair on top doesn't quite reach where the hair on the bottom does. And in between the two, we have what's called graduation. Now with graduation, what's going to happen is that shorter hair on the bottom is going to push up the longer hair on the top. And this is going to give us a very strong silhouette. It's going to push the hair outward when it lays downward. And then depending on how we implement this technique, we can cause this shape to emphasize the jawline or the cheekbone. Because of this strong shape that we put in here, this is essentially how you get self-styling hair. When people talk about shaping their haircut, this is it. So if I were to sort of dishevel the hair here, crunch it up, wiggle it, and scrunch it, you'll see that even like as unstyled as it can get, it's going to hold that shape that we cut in there, very similar to when it's combed down, and it can still produce some harmony on the facial features. And essentially, when you see somebody whose hair is just messed up and it looks good, this is how they do that. And by getting a proper haircut that's shaped nicely, your hair will almost style itself, or at least be very, very easy to style. 90 degrees. This is essentially straight off of the head. And at least on this side of the head here where the surface we're working against is vertical, this is going to be parallel to the floor. Now, let me point out as I start cutting this, the hair on the very bottom there, I didn't cut. And so we're going to have a little bit of that 45-degree angle left. But with the rest of the hair, I'm pulling everything flat to the ground, and I'm using the previous section as a guide to cut the next section. Again, at the bottom there, we have a little bit of a 45 still. Ignore that part. But if you look at the rest of the shape of this panel here, you can see that there's basically a vertical line there. And by doing this, what we end up with is hair on top that is not longer than the hair on the sides, except for that little 45-degree part there. But in this case, when the hair bends and falls down, the hair on top doesn't come anywhere near the hair on the bottom. Now we're getting into some layered territory. And when hair is layered, it moves. It moves a lot. the weight of the hair on the top doesn't hinder the hair on the bottom. The hair on the bottom might help to push out the hair on the top, but because it's short enough and weightless enough, it'll kind of move on its own. This is how they get those really flowy haircuts that you see all over TikTok these days, is you layer the hair. Layers are very, very popular right now. When the hair is combed flat down to the head, you can see that the silhouette it produces is a whole lot slimmer and flatter than doing a 45-degree haircut. And so this is a good way to reduce weight in a sleeker haircut and a good way to add movement. And the last one we're going to go over here is 180 degrees. I wrote 180-ish because a true 180 would be straight up. However, due to the limitations of the length on this head, I only pulled the hair up as high as I could, using that bottom hair as a guide to show me where I could cut it. So this is not a true 180, but it still kind of demonstrates the principle. What's happening here is we're getting a ton of movement. This is a blunt haircut. I cut everything in one pass, and it looks texturized. When the hair is combed flat to the head, it lays really, really flat to the head. It doesn't push outward at all. And so this is taking that weight that we've seen in the last three techniques and just completely removing it. And when you have weightless hair, it sticks up, it dances, it moves, it reacts. When you see this hair cut in this way, it's very, very lively. And as you would imagine, the hair on the top is much shorter now than the hair on the bottom. These kinds of styles are, these kinds of cuts are actually becoming more and more popular lately. I'm doing tons and tons of layering. I hope that this short demonstration was helpful. If anything, just try to imagine each of these different techniques here will cause the hair to want to act in a very specific, unique way. And if your hair is cut like one, it's not going to act like the other. And no amount of blow drying or product will make a layered haircut act like a graduated haircut, at least not easily and not in the long term. And so I don't know what you might want to do with this information. If you are a layman, like, just know that haircutting can be quite complex. Maybe that's why some haircutters have a higher price tag. And if you're a hair cutter and, maybe you're a clipper cutter and you built your business in a barber shop and you want to get into more scissor work, this is haircutting fundamentals. If you want to learn more about this, just go to YouTube and look for haircutting fundamentals elevation. Thanks so much for watching.